we kind of missed this question before we jumped into the Vaughn issue, so I do apologize. But George had asked before, and I'm guessing he's talking about Justin Simmons here, that he is a big part of the scheme Fangio uses to stop the Chiefs as an elite midfielder. Your thoughts, Rich?
I think that depends. He's not fast enough to keep up with a Tyreek Hill. He's not fast enough to keep up with a Nicole Hardman. And he is certainly not physical enough to compete with the likes of Travis Kelce. So if we are in fact talking about Justin Simmons, which I believe you were, George, I understand what the kind of the concept was there is that Simmons can kind of take the other guy, right? He can take all the other people and then leave those other ones for maybe the faster cornerbacks and stuff, which I agree with. I think is absolutely a possibility. However, what I think the Broncos would be better off doing is stop using Simmons the way that they're using him, because they're putting him in very exposing situations. He is not that TJ Ward, I'm going to kill you if you come across my side of the field type of safety, right? I actually think that the Broncos would serve Justin Simmons a lot better if they were able to get a sideline to sideline linebacker to replace Josie Jewell, throw Josie Jewell on the bench. Alexander Johnson has slightly more skill set than Jewell in terms of the ability to blitz and move a little bit better. And I think that would greatly help Simmons. I think that would allow Simmons to do a little bit more on the field and play more to his strengths.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Rich, but I was pretty much took a huge gasp when the Broncos shocked the league by cutting Todd Davis just before the start of the season, and we were kind of like, what the heck's going on? What are they doing over there? Who's gonna cover? And they put all this pressure on Honey Bear, so it's like, okay, Todd Davis is gone. We don't have to worry about is he too injured to play. So it was Alexander Johnson and Josie Jewell. And out of those two linebackers, I think Johnson had the better season, but it wasn't by leaps and bounds. I think Alexander Johnson this season kind of it was more roller coaster. It wasn't as great as last year. Last year, he was like a diamond in the rough. He was making plays. He had an interception here and there. And then this year, it looked like he was trying to do the work of two people. Josie Jewell, my opinion, the same thing. There were a couple plays where he was just magnificent, where he was able to get, stuff to run. But when it came to, stopping guys like, let's Tyreek Hill, for example, or any quick wide receiver, it kind of felt like he struggled in coverage at times. So it'll be interesting to see if the Broncos look for some veteranship in terms of not so much a replacement, but, a free agent or what have you, because if it's one thing that the Broncos haven't been able to get a decent guy, or healthy anyways, it's, linebacker. We already saw what happened with Mark Barron, the guy who never suited up to play as a freaking Bronco. He just got paid a ton of money to never see the field. And is Chiclo even a linebacker, or is he a defensive end?
I think he's a linebacker.
Okay, he's a linebacker. So Chiclo, I think his best play was in New England, if I'm not mistaken. So other than that, I think it's a wide margin in terms of what the Broncos can do with their 9th pick in the draft.
When he was on the field, though, Chicolo in particular, other teams were just abusing him. I mean, they really were. They were just saying, "Oh, you're there,"
yeah,
and they kind of had a little chuckle. Yeah, I think that's Lattimore, is it not, that you're referring to there, Albert?
Yeah.
There's been quite a bit of talk that Lattimore, I have to double check.
Lattimore, I believe.
I think it's Lattimore.
Yeah.
But Lattimore is certainly someone that may well be available in the offseason, because there's been quite a bit of talk. Actually, this is another item you and I were talking about prior to the show. Is that they might have to start looking at ways of cutting back cap space to get themselves under that bar.
Yeah. Glenn Hauser, thanks for coming on to the show. Love seeing you here. Duke Boynton, thanks for coming on board, brother. Good to see you. But you know what? I think that the biggest, in my opinion, probably the worst free agent pickup of this past offseason had to have been Gerald Casey. because Gerald Casey came in with so much hype, especially for what he had done in the postseason, doing what they did against New England, doing what they did against Baltimore. And they almost had Casey up against the ropes, but unfortunately, Casey. So the fact that we were expecting to get that Gerald Casey on the field, and Week 1 was against Tennessee, mind you, a team that would prefer to pay Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill big bucks and let their defense suffer instead of paying Gerald Casey. And we saw during the regular season and the postseason that, in my honest opinion, I think that Tennessee messed that up. But that's neither here or there. I didn't see the same guy that I saw in those games. I saw a guy that kind of looked like he was lost, and then he ended up getting injured. What was it? Week 3, I believe it was, against the Steelers, and then he was out.
Right, but when you look at what the other teams were doing, I think that told you almost all you needed to know about what they saw of Casey. He was not often double teamed. He was, in fact, I don't think he was ever double teamed. People just did not respect him. They didn't see him as that guy, and I think that's what, unfortunately, the hype train was all about with him. Was he was going to be the difference maker, and Tennessee was willing to let him go. So I think that says a little bit there too. And I think that also goes to show, kind of all the way back to the beginning of the pod, my original comments on why I've been so focused on the interior defensive line, is there's kind of two trains of thought. You can go really aggressive on the outside, force teams to try and cover out, and then your interior pressure can get better. And then there's the other line of thinking, which is a little bit more along the lines of how Wade Phillips and our 2015 defense was built, where you had Wolf and Malik Jackson as the DNs, and then you had Sly Williams, who was just kind of the beneficiary of the fact that they were just that darn good. Mm-hmm. And then we got that interior pressure, which then forced coverages to sink in a little bit more, which then allowed Ware and Miller to kind of have their way with the opposing tackles one-on-one. And I've always been a bigger fan of the way that Phillips and our 2015 defenses were built, because I find that they're a little bit more effective and they can stand through the entirety of a season, including the postseason, because that interior pressure also helps against the run. Teams can't run right up that gut, because if your team is that good and that aggressive and can generate that push, it stops the run game a little bit, and it really does help. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, going back to Casey and tying this all back together in a bit of a bow, is Casey provided nothing, and he didn't get a push. He didn't really get the pressures that we were hoping he would. And I think it just showcased that Tennessee has built a really strong interior and general defensive line there, that Casey was just a cog. He was not the reason. And I think his play this year kind of showed us that.
No, and I totally agree, Rich. And me personally, I don't see Denver bringing back Casey unless it comes to a point where it's like Casey wants to be a Bronco and he restructures his contract to be more team friendly. But I just don't see that happening. No. Because I believe he's going to want to be paid big bucks. It's one of the reasons why he left Tennessee. So, and even so, I don't think any team should pay him that much money if they're going to get that type of play from him, to be honest with you. So unless he goes to a team that runs the same scheme he ran when he was in Tennessee, where he can go back to being a cog on the defensive line and not the guy, then, I wouldn't mind it. But if it's, even though the Broncos may have missed the target on Casey, I believe that they found they hit the target or the bullseye with Shelby Harris. And Shelby Harris was a guy that didn't even get a look around by any other teams during the offseason. And he came back on a 1-year deal, if I'm not mistaken, with Denver. And he more than made up for what I think he should be able to get a big contract for next season.
The only thing I'm concerned with Harris about is when he's getting paid now, in terms of how far along he is actually in his career. Almost like Casey, actually. I think Harris is better than Casey by a mile at this point. I think his play showed that. But my only concern is that as he gets a little bit older and as he kind of starts to age, can his body hold up against, that constant grind in the interior of the defensive line. Harris helps with pressure, but that's kind of not his jam. Like, that's not what he's really, really good at. Draymond Jones and DeMarcus Walker are a little bit better at some of the pressure situations. Where Harris makes up for that, though, is in the sack that's not quite a sack and his bats. He might be the best in the league, or certainly one of the best in the leagues at batting passes. I mean, I know that even Fangio, who's basically, you could be the best player on the team and put up all-world stats, and he'll still come on his presser. Oh, he did okay. Yeah, you could still do better. But that's kind of the way he is, right? Is he's very, very tight-lipped when it comes to compliments. And I remember in one of his pressers, earlier in the year, he actually praised Shelby Harris in terms of how he was one of the unique talents that he's ever coached at batting passes. And I mean, as far as Fangio goes, he may as well have just like shouted from the hilltops at just how good he is at doing it, because that's as good as you're going to get from Fangio.